Monday, 6:18 a.m. The building is still silent when you walk through the marble lobby for the second time that day. Technically, you never left. You just went out for a few hours, to return before the sun rises again. Your phone screen displays dozens of messages from your team. Corrections to the model. Changes to the presentation. New numbers submitted by the customer. You take a deep breath and step into the elevator. Now, you're no longer the invisible intern. His name tag says otherwise. Analyst, Investment Banking Division. But within the Wall Street system, this doesn't mean stability. It simply means you've advanced to the next level of the game. A level where the pressure is real, where time ceases to exist, and where every mistake can cost millions. Your table is waiting for you. 3 screens lit up, an open financial model, and a message from your vice president flashing at the top of the screen. We need the new version before noon. It is at this moment that you begin to understand a truth that few admit. Getting into Wall Street is difficult, but surviving as an analyst, that's another story. Level 1. The Invisible Analyst. Being hired as an analyst should mean you finally made it. After years of studying finance, economics, and accounting, after competing for internships that accepted only a small fraction of the candidates, after technical interviews that seemed more like academic tests than professional conversations, you finally get the call. COTO. Offer. A position at a major Wall Street investment bank. For a moment, it looks like the top of a mountain. Proud family, impressed friends, professors saying you've managed to get into one of the most competitive environments in the world. But reality sets in quickly. Because on Wall Street, getting hired doesn't mean you've won. It simply means that you entered the system. On the first day, you realize that something has changed compared to the internship period. As an intern, you observe the system. Now you are part of it. Your desk is no longer a temporary space that someone can occupy next summer. Now it's her permanent post inside a machine that never slows down. 3 screens in front of you, spreadsheets open, financial models that seem to have no end, and a constant stream of messages arriving from different people on the team. More experienced analysts, associates, vice presidents, everyone's waiting for something. Corrections, updates, new figures, responsibilities change. Immediately, you move from simply reviewing parts of a project to building complete financial models. Giant spreadsheets that attempt to transform entire companies into something that fits within an equation. Projected revenue for the next 5 years. Operating margins based on growth scenarios. Debt structures that can completely alter a company's value. Discounted cash flows attempt to calculate how much that business is really worth today. Each tab in the spreadsheet represents a layer of financial reality. Each cell contains a number that needs to make sense within a larger system. And gradually you begin to understand something fundamental. Each cell within that model helps define how much a company is really worth. And on Wall Street, values mean billions. In the first few days, you will work alongside more experienced analysts. They seem to operate at a different speed. They type quickly. They navigate between dozens of spreadsheet tabs without even looking at the keyboard. They revise the numbers several times. They compared current projections with older reports. They question any number that seems even slightly out of the ordinary. Nothing is accepted without verification. Nothing is considered definitive. You begin to realize that that environment doesn't just reward intelligence. They reward absolute precision. And you quickly learn that at this level, intelligence alone is not enough. The system demands something more difficult. Absolute resistance. The hours are starting to pile up. 70 hours a week. After 80. And before long, you realize that 90 hours become commonplace. The days are starting to blend together. Monday feels like Wednesday. Wednesday feels like Saturday. Some nights you leave the office when the streets are already empty. Other times, he simply continues working while the city sleeps. You begin to understand why so many analysts seem perpetually tired. They live within impossible deadlines, simultaneous projects, urgent requests coming from different directors. A VP needs an updated template before a meeting. An associate wants to review figures before submitting a presentation. A managing director requests last-minute changes before speaking with a client. And each of these requests arrives with the same silent expectation. Let the work be delivered, fast and perfect. At this level, you gain something important: real access to the game. You start to see companies being evaluated for acquisition. You follow discussions about mergers that could alter entire industries. You see how banks compete with each other to lead in billion-dollar deals. You begin to realize that behind every financial news story, there is a huge amount of invisible work. Spreadsheets built in the wee hours of the morning. Presentations adjusted dozens of times. Entire teams analyze every detail before any decision is made. But at the same time, you gain access to the inner workings of the system. You start to lose something, silently. Time. Hours that once belonged to your personal life now belong to work. I am. Some nights seem too short to recover the energy needed for the next day. Life outside the office. Invitations are declined. Plans are cancelled. Weeks go by without you even noticing. And within that environment, nobody seems to consider that strange. Because within the Wall Street system, there is a silent rule. Those who can keep up with the pace continue to climb. Those who can't, they simply disappear. Nobody makes an announcement. No one explains it. The person simply stops appearing at the next table, and another analyst takes his place. Therefore, to continue rising within the system, you only need to prove one thing. Who can keep up the pace without breaking down? Because at that level, being intelligent is expected, being quick is necessary, but surviving the constant pressure, that's what really determines who stays in the system. Level 2. The 100 hours. The first truly brutal week arrives without warning. On Wall Street, almost nothing is announced in advance. The pace simply changes from 1 hour to the next. On a seemingly normal morning, a new project appears on your computer screen. A potential merger between two companies valued at billions of dollars. One of them has dominated its sector for decades. The other has grown rapidly in recent years and has now become a strategic acquisition target. If the deal goes through, it will be one of the most important operations in that segment that year. The bank wants to lead the operation. This means something very specific within the Wall Street system. Weeks of preparation, extremely detailed financial models, strategic presentations that need to convince executives and investors, market scenarios that simulate different growth possibilities, and all of this needs to start immediately. Your team is responsible for preparing the first draft of the material that will be presented to the executives in charge of the negotiation. This is not the type of work that can wait a few days. It needs to happen quickly, very fast. During that week, time completely loses its meaning. You arrive at the office before 8 in the morning, a few days before 7. I leave after 2 in the morning, other times after 3. And on some nights, it simply doesn't go out. The office transforms into a strange environment. Silent, almost empty, illuminated only by the computer screens scattered around the room. Piles of coffee begin to accumulate on the tables. Empty glasses, water bottles, notes written in haste. Analysts reviewing spreadsheets as if their lives depended on it. Because, in a way, they depend on each other. Each financial model needs to reflect reality with almost surgical precision. Projected recipes, operating costs, possible synergies between the two companies, impact of different debt levels, changes in interest rates. Any small error can completely distort the value of the operation. And when a transaction involves billions of dollars, distortions are unacceptable. This becomes your first week of 100 hours of work. At first you believe it's something temporary, an exceptional situation, a specific moment within an important project. But he soon notices something different. This intensity is part of the structure. This is how the system works. At this level, you learn one of the most important lessons about Wall Street. The system spares no effort. He measures results under pressure. Nobody asks how many hours you worked. Nobody cares if you slept well. The only question that really matters is another one. Is the work finished? Your financial model needs to be perfect. Your analysis needs to make sense in all possible scenarios. Your presentation needs to convince executives who have been analyzing businesses of this size for decades. And all of this needs to happen quickly, because the market doesn't wait. Other banks are competing for the same business. Customers want quick answers. Executives want decisions based on reliable numbers. You begin to understand that every analyst is constantly being tested, not just in technical skill, but it's about the ability to keep functioning when the body wants to stop, when the mind begins to slow down, when fatigue starts turning small tasks into enormous challenges. Some analysts are able to adapt to this pace, others are beginning to show signs of wear and tear. And within the system, this is rarely discussed. It just happens. Because those who can't keep up with the pace, they disappear silently from the system. Level 3. The first presentation. A few weeks later, something unexpected happens. Up until that point, his routine had been predictable within the brutal logic of Wall Street. Spreadsheets, endless revisions, corrections sent in the middle of the night, and financial models that seem to grow without stopping. You work behind the scenes. Analysts almost always work away from the visible decision-making process. They construct the numbers. Others defend the numbers. But that morning something changes. Your vice president appears at your desk. He doesn't usually stay there for very long. He typically just sends messages or comments in the files, but this time he says something different. Join us in the meeting room. For a few seconds you think that maybe you just need to adjust some technical detail during the meeting. Analysts typically don't speak at these meetings. They just watch. But this time something changed. You helped build an important part of the merger's financial model, and someone needs to explain the numbers. When you enter the meeting room, you immediately notice that the environment is different from the rest of the office. The lights are softer. The table is long. The chairs are occupied by people who make decisions that go far beyond any formula in a spreadsheet. Executives are seated around the table. Bank directors, your vice president, a general manager who oversees the entire operation, possibly the person responsible for closing the deal. The atmosphere inside is different. Silence, expectation, no side conversations, no keyboard is being pressed. Everyone is waiting for the presentation to begin. You connect your laptop to the screen. The presentation appears. Slides carefully prepared over the past few weeks. Charts showing revenue growth. Valuations based on market multiples. Projections that attempt to anticipate how a merger could transform two companies into an even more valuable organization. For a few minutes you explain the numbers. Her voice sounds steady, but her heart is beating faster. Each slide represents hours of work. Each chart carries a logic that needs to make sense to everyone there. Any mistake would be noticed immediately. Any inconsistency could destroy the credibility of the entire work. Experienced executives can recognize weak numbers in seconds. And in that environment, credibility is everything. When you finish the third slide, something starts to happen. The questions begin. A director questions a growth projection. Another executive asks about the impact of debt in the most pessimistic scenario. The managing director wants to understand how the model reacts if the market slows down. For a few seconds, the atmosphere seems even quieter. Then you answer. You explain the logic. Show the tabs of the model. It demonstrates alternative scenarios. And he realizes something important. You know the answer, because he spent entire nights building that model. Each formula, each reference between spreadsheets, each adjustment is made after team reviews. Gradually the tension decreases. The executives look back at the slides. Some people take notes. Others simply watch in silence. When the meeting ends, nobody applauds. Nobody is celebrating. On Wall Street, important meetings rarely end with celebrations. They end with silent decisions. As people begin to leave the room, his vice president walks past him. He doesn't give a speech. It doesn't draw attention to the moment. He simply says something straightforward. Good work. And within Wall Street, that means a lot. Because at that moment, something silently changes. You stop being just someone who performs tasks. You become someone who understands the system from the inside. And within such a competitive system, this difference can determine who continues to rise and those who remain invisible. Level 4. The real pressure. It is at this stage that the pressure changes in nature. Before, you only performed tasks. Now you bear direct responsibility. Your team is starting to trust you more. This means that entire parts of financial models become yours. If something is wrong, your name will be associated with the mistake. Projects are starting to pile up. Simultaneous presentations. Multiple negotiations are underway, each with different deadlines, different clients, different expectations. And then, a decisive moment arrives. A new project is coming to your team, an extremely complex merger. But the deadline imposed by the executives is practically impossible. Your VP looks at you and says, "We need this ready by tomorrow." You know that finishing this in less than 24 hours will be brutal, but he also understands something else. This type of project can define your reputation within the bank. If you accept, you can prove that you are ready for greater responsibilities. If you refuse, another analyst will take his place. And in the Wall Street system, opportunities rarely come twice. You accept the deadline. Final climb. In the coming hours, the office will once again transform into a silent battlefield. Financial models are being revised. Presentations are being adjusted. Constant messages in the team chat. You work non-stop. Coffee replaces meals. The clock strikes 2 in the morning, after 4. As the sun begins to rise between the buildings of Manhattan, the performance is finally ready. Hours later, his VP sends the material to the executives. The customer's decision will still take weeks, but at that moment something had already changed. You proved that you can, to function under extreme pressure, and on Wall Street, that's worth more than any degree, is left over. But as you look out the office window, you realize something you hadn't understood before. Each victory within this system brings a new level of expectation. More responsibility, more exposure, more risk. Today you are an analyst, but the next level demands something even more difficult. Leading teams, making strategic decisions, taking risks that involve billions of dollars. And on Wall Street, the higher you climb, biggest sand, it creates the possibility of a fall. That night, when she finally leaves the building, Manhattan remains as brightly lit as ever. Cars are passing by, people walk down the streets. The city seems normal, but inside those glass buildings, something different happens. A system continues to function. Analysts are at work, executives negotiate, billions of dollars change direction. Individuals enter, individuals leave, but the structure remains. And now you understand something that few people realize at first. Getting hired was just the first step. Surviving as an analyst, it's just the second level of the Wall Street system.